All right, everybody, welcome back to the Web3 show. This is our long-form YouTube edition. Travis, Donald, and my good friend and our friend, Danny DeMichele. 4 agency backgrounds in this call, talking about AI and all the things that it will and won't do and the opportunities and challenges ahead. I can't wait for this one. Guys, great to see you all. Danny, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Thank you.
So, Danny, while we, because I know we're all chomping at the bit to get into this conversation, I want to dive right in. But just for those who might not know anything about us or you, what is your background? What was your road to what we're now calling, Web3, but this world of AI? You're deeply now for the last, call it 6 months, been like 20 hours a day in enterprise GPT, all things AI. And you've learned a tremendous amount, but you've also applied a lot of pattern recognition. So just for those who don't kind of know how you got here, what was your career arc? How did you end up in this crazy world?
Yeah, first off, it wasn't being a technologist or an AI guy. It started in e-commerce in '96. Rode the wave up and down. Had a couple of digital agencies. Early in my career, what really catapulted me was early in SEO. Back in the Alta Vista days, pre-Google, and rode that into some full service agencies, had a couple of exits there, co-founded and exited a top 20 Amazon seller / agency of recent. And to be honest, just kind of got a little burnt out of it. Kind of lost my passion. So for the last couple of years, been playing more like reactive firefighter with some of the companies that I own, and just kind of latched onto it. Saw this thing, GPT, was kind of fascinated. Very quickly turned to fear, saying that, okay, we're toast. Like, better go figure out how to flip burgers. But then
you may not want to do that, because that's going to be AI'd out here for a minute.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe learn how to roll a burrito, because Travis still shops at Chipotle, so at least there'd be a customer for that.
That is true. Robots can't roll good burritos, probably.
Yeah, you got to come down to San Diego for a good burrito. And stumbled upon this guy that was talking about GPT in like a private, internal, enterprise, whatever you want to call it, instance. And he was kind of relating it to tracking your personal life and that, and started just playing with it like I usually do. I'm not like a big in the clouds guy. I'm really more of an in the weeds guy. I like going pretty deep when I attach to something, and then sort of pass it along to someone a lot better than me to really productize it and push it out. And so went in the weeds really deep, and with a couple of programmers, my son, and started building, basically just putting GPT against our own internal data. And where I really got excited is I'm an agency guy, but I hate the agency model, right? I hate it for the owner and I hate it for the client. And because a lot of that comes around the inability to stay consistent with product output, the inability to scale because of just the challenge with continuing to bring on good people that can adopt internal processes and knowledge really quickly. Yeah. And so really just started building internally, and just honestly couldn't believe, with just very little knowledge in this category, how powerful of a product we were able to build for ourselves internally. And so been kind of evangelical out there telling people against there's nothing wrong with the SaaS plays, but the benefit is it doesn't cost more. Bring it inside, and it will absolutely blow your mind as to the power it could do. So that was my last 6 months, and it was 20 hours a day, 7 days a week, full addiction.
Yeah, and I will say, before you guys jump in with a bunch of questions, I will say I've known Danny almost 15 years now. I've watched him exit, I think, 3 times from different things. I've never seen him like he's been the last 6 months. Like, usually it's hard to get in touch with because he's like doing something fun. Now he's hard to get in touch with because he's basically working with programmers, around the world and building stuff. So it's
I can attest to that because I think we were chatting about doing a demo sometime, and it was like, oh, well, Danny's over here doing this and he's doing that. I'm like, well, let's get a time one of these days. Let's see what's up. Because the power of marketing with ChatGPT, it is mind blowing. I remember I got on ChatGPT, I think it was almost 3. And I know when 3 came out, I was like, whoa, okay, this is awesome. But still, the large language model wasn't so large yet, right? Then as 3.5 popped out and you could tap into the API using that, that's amazing. But then when you start thinking about ChatGPT 4 and how big ChatGPT 4, and I've been using this plugin called AI PRM that's been giving me super prompts, right? The ability to go in and ask us, you are marketing GPT expert, and we need to do this and we need to do that. And so that's, so the input and the output becomes pretty amazing. My only challenge that I'm seeing so far, Danny, is a lack of memory, right? It only has 8,000 tokens of memory at this point. And it's like connecting that so it remembers what it told you before, because a lot of times you get to a point and you're like, all right, this was great content, this is awesome, and then the next time it spews out something completely random and it's not anything that you had trained it or talked about before. So how maybe are you utilizing that? Is there something where you're able to connect it to maybe like a Pinecone.io or something to tap into a database, a vector database or something, so it remembers what it said before? Because that's one of the biggest challenges that I'm having.
Yeah, that's one is, yes, we are using Pinecone, and that's exactly what we do, and that's exactly the benefit. Well, there's a lot of benefits to it, but permanent memory, long-term memory, like I said, I'm not a technician, so some of the things I might say, or I'm not a technologist, but so some of the things might not be the technical accurate word. I'd say it's more the dummy, real, normal guy's version. But so now everything that we do in our organizations now, as it relates to generative AI or language models, it's going to our own code instance, sort of like a lang chain, and bunch of kind of widgets and customizations put into our a data frame, and from there we connect into Pinecone for like a specific client instance, or for our own instance.
Mm-hmm.
So the only thing that knows is the content we put in. And so you don't have like data pollution. You don't have you don't have to worry about like if you're using it for financials, let's say, you don't have to worry about like a press release overriding actual real financials if you're trying to query it for data, because of, again, not the right word, but prioritization of content where it should be looking for certain types of data based on prompt. But yeah, that the memory part and the benefits that come with it, knowing your voice, your brand, whether it's regulatory concerns and controls, but then also like the benefit it gets to the entire company. If you're going into ChatGPT and doing a prompt, there's no real easy way to kind of store that and share that with the entire organization. And in this case, you can do whatever you want via API, webhooks, it doesn't matter. So that's one of the biggest benefits. So it's really, it's like the smartest person in your organization.
Then I have a question, because I came from the agency background. You sell creative, you sell a campaign idea, you sell media planning, you sell like digital advertising. So basically you're not offering like AI as a service, right? It's really using AI to hasten your work and make it more efficient, make it more creative, right? So it's not really AI as a service. Okay.
Yeah, we want to, in my opinion, whatever the speed at which this goes, the new baseline is going to change. Content output, content type. We want to get ahead of the baseline, but as you know, as an agency owner, like quality control, consistency across clients, employee changes, whether they leave or they change spots in your organization, there's always these data gaps that ultimately the client feels the pain on. And so this is helping control that. So we're using it as more of a quality and more output, rather than maybe some agencies might use it for, I don't know, margin, however you want to use it. But I just like that it allows us to provide a more consistent output, and the client gets the benefit of that.
Yeah, and I think you can really do quicker work, quicker turnaround, especially on the creative side, copywriting. I mean, even generating ideas.
Yeah.
Usually you spend a lot of time there. Now you can really use AI to help you with that.
Yeah, and it's like it's not, I'm not looking at it as a way to like get rid of people, but what I want is the people that we hire, I want their time to go into what their superpower is, right?
Yeah.
Not an empty white screen. So it's not going to take over all of our content writing, but maybe it starts, with the ideation part of it, and it just gets them, into their zone for their skill set quicker, and which everybody benefits from.
Yeah, and you think you have no problem with getting the talent to, or do you think your talent there in the US is, because in Asia side we're very much into ChatGPT already. You don't have any demand or supply of, I mean the supply of talent is okay there.
Yeah, it's funny because, and I think it's why I connected with it so early, is it, for the most part, and I don't want to diminish the call it technology side of this whole thing, but a lot of it sits at GPT. A lot of it sits as far as that true AI tech for an organization like ours. It's us accessing, just like, I could go build a checkout process, but I could make the best checkout flow for e-commerce, right?
Yeah.
And so it's the same thing. And really, as a marketer, it has all the same parts and kind of that same. The problem is the adoption, is people kind of still resisting it, and not educating themselves on the options available to them, because they'll go in, they'll throw a bad prompt in, they're not getting into prompt chaining and sequencing, and the automations that can occur there. You're not going to be able to create a fantastic product with a single prompt. I don't care how well written that prompt is. And so how do you force that dialogue and automate those dialogues? We have chain prompts that could be 20, 30, 40 forced dialogues that are, and so just it's the smartest thing there. It's are you using it right? And so I just see a lot of resistance because they, whether it's insecurity or whether it's they just haven't tried it correctly. That's the biggest problem I'm seeing right now.
Well, I think let me go on that thread, and then I think it'll pick up. The guys will kind of pick right up on what you and I've talked about offline, which is your background in kind of architecture of UX and all those things, right? Usability has been applied internally right now, but now there's external realities that are emerging for you as business opportunities, as new ways to productize this. But internally, you basically bought back an agency. You have several others in the portfolio, some in healthcare, some in whatever. And you started to basically just look for how could we reprocess and automate our systems and be better and kind of get ahead of it. And because of that deep dive you took, one of the first things your brain went to, because of your experience through this Web 1, Web 2, Web 3 now world, was this thing's not going to get adopted. Like enterprises, even agency, I'm not going to get people to do it. Like I can have the interface and I can make it easier, but they're still going to have to do something new. It's still a new place to log in. So some of the things that I think were interesting that you applied to this and learned was just, how do I get my team to use it? How do I make sure that I own it, right? So that when they're training something, they're training us to get smarter, not something else. And what have you kind of pick up on that thread? Like, what have you learned? What do companies need to be thinking about? What do brands need to be thinking about if they're not just the agencies, but what have you learned through that as you've kind of architected this solution for yourself and then others?
Yeah, one thing, my goal with what we're doing right now is that we'll be able to use generative AI in every part of the business, and no one has to know or talk about, or not as a like we're trying to keep them out of it, but it's unnecessary. Meaning to call it, we're going to use generative AI. We're just embedding it into the process, and so meaning if you want to activate, and when you have your own enterprise internal version of this, you can bake it anywhere. So meaning you can bake it into Slack or within email or within your CRM, and so it's being used without it need. We're pounding on our chest saying we're moving all to generative. It's like, it's almost just, it's kind of irrelevant. It's like no one makes a big deal when someone's using Zapier to automate something, right? Like, just consider it another tool. That's really all that we're doing it. And we're trying to take the need for everybody to become generative AI prompt engineers and fine tuners and chain sequencers. And it's just, here's a tool. How do we take all of the potential for a subpar output? So how do we bake in and force prompt chaining? So we might have a staff member, or we give client access, and they want to create a new ideation for a blog post. Well, they can literally just say, I need to ideate a new blog post, and we're going to force maybe a 10 chain sequence behind it. They don't have to know about it. They don't need to think about it. So I think it's pulling this, it's pulling the all this kind of mystifying tech out of it, because you don't need to think of it that way. It's not as, it seems, I think, more threatening to people or scary or whatever, because when you have it internally, you just bake it in and make it, you could make it any kind of user interface you want, whether it's GUI interface or email. You could use it through chat. You can use it through whatever phone, doesn't matter. So, I don't know if that answers it specifically, but
no, it's really interesting. I think when some people first get on ChatGPT and they're going, wow, this is interesting information. What do I do with it? How do I use this? And then they start learning some of the prompting skills, as you mentioned, right? But then the sort of chain prompts and the being able, like, once you have this, then build this and then that. So is this sort of like you built your own sort of custom auto GPT in a sense, right? Where it's like, but it's platformed for each particular client, so they all have their own box around them, so the data is not getting corrupted, which is extremely valuable. And that's one of the challenges that I think that a lot of people have, myself included, is that I have a certain directive I'm trying to accomplish, but then it starts just pulling random shit out of nowhere that it's like, well, this is not any of the truth. I want to define the truth. Here is our truth, and here is our story, especially because I'm working on this thing called, Cornytopia, which is a story that is, based about these little corn characters, and it's all, want to inspire kids to do all these different things. And it's like, I'm going in and I'm utilizing it. I take input from the community, bring it in, input it, and then I bring in all my backup data because I have to retrain it again because it didn't remember anything that I said before. Even though if I'm on that same chat conversation thread, it only has 8,000 tokens that it can remember, right? And so I was like, okay, well, do I plug this into another tool like Claude that can give me 1 million tokens that I can plug in? But then it's like, is it pulling from the same information? Is it pulling from additional information? So a lot of people have a lot of challenges, I think, with that, to be able to get even quality data. And then sometimes ChatGPT kind of seems on one side, oh my God, it's so amazing. On the other side, it's like, what? This has no congruence. And so I think you're maybe finding that middle line where, is that something that could potentially be built into like a plugin that other people could utilize or something in the back end code that you've created?
I would say the reason why we built this is I went through the same experience you did. It's like, and there is a widget for everything. There is something for everything, and you can get some bubble gum and kind of patchwork it together. The problem is to get a team to consistently use it, those processes are just not going to work, right? Like, trying to change the behavior, adding 16, new, connection points between 10 different widgets. Yeah, you could probably pull off anything out there. It's just, it's just going to be time consuming. There's breakage, and then the costs will just start going through the roof. And there are products out there that can go on to conferences and record and transcribe, right? And give you a summary of the meeting you were in. So when we built the brain, so when we think about this thing, it's like truly like a brain. Like that's your thing. How what you do with it, how you connect it, do whatever you want. Then it's just
it's like a little business brain. I like that.
And then it's just widgets around it. So we decided to test one of the big recording transcription companies versus a widget that we built in like 5 hours to do the same thing. And so I used it for a month just to test it. Near the same quality, like meaning I think they're using the same language model instance we are. It was $220 for a month of usage for it to hit every one of my meetings. Ours was 4 hours of widget time and $1.12 or $1.20 in API costs. And that's just one widget. And then also, we're not constricted based on what the SaaS has as far as integration back into our system, so we can create any workflow we want. So I don't know if you were asking that, but yeah, I mean, the widgets are the easy part. Like, they're open source, they're easy, they're all the stuff that all of us marketers have always been doing anyways, right? And it's just applying it to a new maybe database. Yeah, so the widgets are the easy part, and the extensions or platforms, all those things are just what marketers do.
And it's almost like this too. So what I've noticed is it's like, I'm not a programmer. I mean, I did some JavaScript and ActionScript and stuff back in the day, but I've never used Python. I've never used, going into the command prompt and then installing a GitHub and then going through the process, the original process to get Auto GPT set up. I figured it out, but I was like, oh my God. So I think in some ways AI is actually pushing the limits of what you could potentially even do, right? Because you're like, wow, I can do all of these things here. I want to figure it out. And so I think in some ways, if you're a curious person, you're going to find a way to make this stuff connect.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's I think it's easier than some people might think. I'm not saying it's like you're going to get up tomorrow and do this, but the reality is the speed at which this thing is going to reset the baseline against your competitors. You do not, and the speed of innovation, all these unknowns, what language models are going to win, which language models are better for creative versus data analyzing data or Google Analytics, whatever. And you do not want to restrict yourself to these SaaS models and hope and pray and that they keep up. So, I keep, like I was telling Chris, I think like a year of internet adoption back in the late 90s is probably equivalent to the speed of maybe it's 2 weeks, 1 week, a month or something of AI adoption. And so I think it's critically important that people are going to be set up to be able to take hold of their own destiny on this thing and not leave it up to these big organizations that we all know are slow, and there's just no need to.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting about that is there's a force function in that that competitive market opportunity, meaning if you don't start to figure this stuff out for yourself or stand on the shoulders of someone like you who's figured some things out and then innovate on top of that, it's not even you're gonna be left behind. You just won't, you'll just be doing something else. Like the baseline will be too high, you won't be able to do it. But because of what you've kind of done with yourself and what others are probably thinking about, or where this could scale, there's a natural decentralization to it that happens. Meaning, if you build an architecture that allows you to own your own brain and own your own personal language model, large language model, leveraging the inputs of other best, case scenarios, then there's this decentralization effect amongst all the brands, all the IP holders that just naturally happen. So then we had an interesting conversation last week. Travis and Donald, Danny and I were in a 8-hour board meeting about this with Bill from Twin and some other folks. So, you just recently kind of got your brain around where blockchain kind of fits into this whole piece, Danny. So I'd love to kind of just hear from you, like, what were some of your takeaways from, that deep dive? Because you've been around blockchain, you understand it, you kind of, but you hadn't really thought about it in the same way of how it connects to what you're building on the front end. And so what are your takeaways from that, since, it was a couple of days ago?
You're asking me about blockchain stuff?
No, your takeaways. Your takeaways from it. Like,
yeah.
What was an aha?
I mean, we deal a lot in life sciences, healthcare, very data protected companies, which was also one of the key reasons why we jumped into data ownership and owning your own data, trading against it. But this whole blockchain AI marriage, I mean, it's like, it couldn't be more obvious to me. You know, again, back to not understanding the technical pieces of this, but it would appear to me that you know, not only anybody that even knows a little bit about blockchain, like myself, knows that there is no better way of storing data. What I also took out of it was that AI, you know, blockchain always fascinated me in the use cases on the data side and the smart contract side. But it's hard, it's big. There wasn't that pain point need, I think, enough, and it became too NFT and promotional, and coins and tokens kind of took over the narrative. I believe that AI will kind of force blockchain adoption, because the speed at which, again, this innovation occurs, you're going to need to figure out every possible way to protect your data. And based on what this company, we were kind of going back and forth on how this thing worked, it also seems actually very very streamlined. It's not as, again, as big of this complex infrastructure build, and it just couldn't be more obvious. So I know you connected with it, you know, way before I did, but I came out at that meeting thinking, this is now where blockchain starts taking off as an infrastructure. There's like no choice almost.
Yeah, it is a fascinating thing, you know, because I've been in blockchain, paying attention to it, you know, doing a show around it for almost 6 years now. And it seems to me, it's like, that's one thing that I'm just always keeping an eye on, like, oh, okay, AI, crypto, blockchain. Uh-oh, which one of these is going to be the one that 1000X's? Because you know there's going to be one of them, and there might be a couple of them. And I've not seen any of them blow up yet. I know that we're chatting. We've had some great conversations with Twin Protocol. They have potential to blow up. There's some other ones that have some potential to blow up. But it almost seems to me, as you're talking about this database stuff, that having that single moment of truth, having that sort of like, this is the definitive version of us, like putting that into a blockchain, right? In some way, querying that through AI in some way, it almost seems like more people are going to potentially have their own personal blockchain, potentially where it's their own walled garden. Maybe, is that something that you see?
Yeah, and you know, being able to monetize that. You know, one thing that we again, it's like every day I kind of blow my own mind, not on something we've built, but just the capabilities of AI as we kind of accidentally stumble upon things. One thing I stumbled upon is how much great content was sitting in my emails, which I have every email since, I don't know, 2004 or something in my email account. And how much value was sitting in the email, just in my emails, right? And you know, and so there's going to be so many ways for people to monetize their content that they've had, their ideas. I don't care what category it is. It could be gardening, it could be digital marketing, it could be, I don't know, collecting memorabilia, whatever. And then you start adding that to the blockchain, and you can tokenize that and monetize that. It's gonna democratize, like, you know, maybe it's content monetization. And so I think that's going to be super interesting. And yeah, I think these personal ones are awesome. You know, I've got, you know, 3 kids. I'd love to be able to have been storing this within this technology the whole time and say, hey, what was that? You know, give me the you know, I want a picture from every trip and you know, route we took for every Big Sur Thanksgiving holiday we did between, you know, 2005 and 2015, right? Or what was that guy that I met with 2 years ago that was in solar? And like, there are just so many ways to utilize it, personally, professionally, a hybrid of both. And that's where I think blockchain starts making it really interesting, especially on that monetization of your own content and your own stuff.
Yeah, the summary I would say from that is when you think about some of the examples you just gave, like whether you're an enterprise or not, I think it was 2019, Travis, I can't remember what we did a seminar or that virtual blockchain week that you did back in 2020. And I remember one of my slides was Gartner had done research that the year prior, $6.7 billion of transactional trade was done bot to bot, basically an AI buying from an AI without a human involved. Now that was in 2020. There was almost $7 billion a year worth of transactions running over a network that requires high transaction fees, sometimes 30 to 45 days to settle, meaning the Swift or banking network. When I can not only secure my own data, Danny, to your point, or my own inquiries, or have the hash point to another chain that's like an Arweave where I can permanently store for 200 years if it's like family photos or things like that. But when I go to transact that, or when I go to do an API call on that, and it's fractions of a penny because of the way that I've built the SDK, there's no banking rails that can support that level of transaction, right? It's too costly. Whereas with things, whether it be Lightning, whether it be, I mean, we're not going to pick a chain because there's multiple, but at the end of the day, when AI is creating this compound effect to the baseline of what's being created from an IP standpoint, from a content standpoint, you need a place to not only secure it, client to client or whatever, but now when those things want to buy from each other, those agents, those twins that you've built want to transact with each other, you need the payment rails too. And that's where it gets really interesting, like you said, from a force function. So
hold that thought because we're going to end in about 10 seconds.
yeah, so jump back in, guys. Just I'm going to hit it and then just jump back in the same link. We'll finish up like 10 or 15 minutes. All right, so just jump right back in the same link.
Yeah, Donald, I would love to know about how you guys started using it. You mentioned that you guys were early adopters. How are you guys using it internally? What are you thinking?
No, I'm very fascinated with the stuff that you mentioned, because everyone here knows GPT, but everyone is using it from a very basic level. So I do see a lot of creative media people still using it just for personal functions, but not for work. Not the level and depth of how you are doing it. In fact, I was thinking, are you still a digital agency, or are you a GPT agency, or a digital agency powered by GPT, right? We see some bits and pieces. Mostly, most digital agencies have somewhat matured and saturated. It's a very saturated space already. So they're doing a lot of, maybe a bit of TikTok selling, which is quite big here in Asia. We do a lot of still, of course, SEO, social media marketing. That's still very much the norm. But we see already a lot of budding, what we call NFT agencies. So they go to a lot of these brands and says, I'll create your NFT. Let's do utility. Let's do something exciting. Or we saw some, like 2 or 3 here, telling themselves, we can be your metaverse marketing agency. So we can set up your store inside the metaverse. We do a bit of programming. So, everyone is trying their hand in Web3, but not to the level of what I think the level of depth that you're doing. I was thinking, if you set up like an agency powered by GPT, you can be acquired by a bigger agency. Very much like 10 years ago, when all agencies, big agencies, were buying digital agencies. And then after that, they don't know what to do with it.
Yeah. It was like our Amazon agency, same thing. It's I don't want to be like evangelical about it, but to me, if you're a digital agency, you have to be generative. So, but yes, there is a window at which agencies like us can take advantage of that, or not, use that as a niche or a specialty. But I guess that, I think there's 2 probably types. There is an agency that will come in because this is going to be a huge need for enterprises and helping them build generative within their processes, right? And then there's going to be just the agencies using it, because if they don't, they're going to be, they're going to be like the horse and carriage mechanic that's like, nah, I'm sticking with these babies. When Ford's coming around, so they're not have a choice how they end up marketing it, utilizing it. Some of them, I'll tell you what, I think there's a lot of guys on Fiverr and Upwork right now that are making 100 times the margin they used to be for some narrow period of time. People will take advantage of that. But lightning time, it'll just simply be, if you don't have it, you're just kind of irrelevant. So
Yep.
I think what's interesting
It
too,
does seem like it's the verge of
go ahead, Travis.
the haves and the have-nots is where we're entering this space, right? It's like you do it, you're going to have these things. If not, you don't have it, and it's like I think it's really going to create that more of that digital divide that people are having. Like if you're not using this, and like if you're sort of you're against it, you're a Luddite, you don't want to learn about this, you're not curious, then it puts you at a supreme disadvantage over others.
yeah, and it's our, it's the clients too. We're trying to explain this to them just because we're transparent, letting them know we're using it. And the dialogue narrative is still like, oh, so you can like make more content and plagiarize content. It's like the education to the client is going to be a big friction point. And people just have to realize how wide this tool actually goes, way beyond content, way beyond creative. Literally every aspect of the business will have a component for generative. And like you said earlier, Travis, the speed, 3 to 3, 5 to 4, it's like, earthquakes are measured, like a 7.0, like a 7.1 is double the power of a 7.0. In GPT progress, it's kind of the same thing. So, there's just education is going to be a big part. Hopefully the, passing essays and plagiarizing content starts going away and people see the real use case, because we're getting as much fight for clients and question marks against clients as we are as staff and people in general. So the education needs to start going as quickly as the speed at which the technology is progressing.
Yeah, I think, tying some of these things together for everybody, Danny, one of the things I think is your genius is the pragmatism that you kind of apply almost because you need it for yourself, right? But what you end up doing is you end up inventing work streams and process architecture that brings something like this into an actual workable, usable tool, for lack of a better word. And why I say that is because essentially the problem you identified organically, or however you came to it, was this fact that, like, doesn't matter what I can do. If I can cobble together all these widgets, if I can come up with an output that doesn't suck and that's original or whatever that thing is, I don't care about if I can do it. What I care about is, can I get teams of people to do it with the same efficiency and without having to learn or spend 6 months learning this stuff or tinkering, because maybe they won't tinker, more likely than not they won't tinker. Can I get agency clients to trust that they own it versus tell them they own it? Can I get cost models down from $200 a month to $1.12, right? And when you start thinking about that, you can be very bearish on some of these premiums being paid for what I would call SaaS plays. Not picking on anybody, but just the reality of how fast that'll move through an adoption curve to irrelevance, right? Like, because you can't sustain multiple $200 a month subscriptions when it could cost you $1.12 to integrate those things at scale, right? Like,
yeah, no, and if you got, and you just need, look, whatever tool is right for the business, it needs to be set up in a way that you have frictionless, whether it's cost, whether it's education of how to use it. It needs to be frictionless across the board. Companies right now, people are using it, right? I don't know what percentage of it. What they're using it, whether that company is adopting it or not adopting it or blocking it or restricting it, people are using it, and they're using it in silos, and they're inadvertently probably sharing data. It's like, why not just, instead of making these silos, why not just get the benefit out of it? Like, stop being fearful of it. It's like, what's this whole internet thing back in 95? We're not going on that internet thing. Like, this is not the time to have that attitude.
Oh, Danny, this is a fad. AI is a fad. I don't know what you're thinking. Blockchain is a fad. And also the internet. It's a big bubble. There's a big .com bubble behind you. You should remind yourself of that every day.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I think, you also brought up a point earlier. I want to just reiterate too, kind of in summary of some of these things, is like, whether we call it Web 2.5 or whatever, the reality is that the problems that Web 2, the platform-centric world of walled gardens like Facebook, Twitter, whatever, that own all the data for brands and own the platform and that get rich while basically the IP holder is leveraging it because they don't have a better tool to get to the customer. As that starts to shift, that's still a big leap because all the infrastructure that agencies helped build and deploy was optimized for, a search type social internet, right? Which is kind of how we evolved. And now we're talking about an internet model in Web3, this ideal model where the edge networks of builders and owners own and have their own proxy. But
if you do it right,
unless you have something like AI that can generate that output at a scale that is fast enough, big enough, and large enough where you could even choose to own it, it kind of never gets us there, right? So like you said, blockchain just kind of limps along in this like, well, it's a cool thing, but I don't know how it'll ever really be useful. When all of a sudden you start doing what you've done, which more and more people will do, which is own the large language model, own the data set, own whether it's in Pinecone or whether it's in a decentralized storage, it doesn't really matter where it sits at the end of the day in the interim. If I'm generating it at scale and I'm owning it, now what I'm doing is I'm kind of creating this necessary bridge. And then you guys saw like Twitter this week, made an announcement. Anyone who has a subscription model, like pushes content with subscription on Twitter, Elon basically said, well, you're going to own the database. We're going to give you the email list so that if you ever decide to leave Twitter, you can bring your subs with you, right? And that's one Web 2 platform kind of looking around the corner going, we know we can't hold this anymore. Like we're going to get resistance.
Yeah, but the new walled garden for the enterprise is going to be the Salesforce of the world, the HubSpots, because they're going to bring that in, hook you in. They're going to train your data is going to be trained internally. 3 years from now, you're going to have to start it all over again. And
interesting.
That's I think that's going to be a really hard thing, even if enterprises know that they don't want to do that. I mean, pulling yourself out of a platform like that is very difficult.
Right. Like a Marketo or a Salesforce or what have you. So I wonder what that means for like something like Sugar or, like something that's more open source that allows you to build. Will they start to, position against that as the CRM you can take with you type of thing? I don't know.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
It is interesting. I know that, HubSpot's founder, he created something like called ChatSpot. It's like its own sort of a thing. So I think you're spot on with that, Danny. As HubSpot's CRM evolves into this AI platform, and it is with chatspot.ai, I think is their new platform. They're going to start training all their data and pulling in new information, which is going to keep it more sticky. They're not going to want to leave. So whoever owns your business data really is going to be the place and the provider where you're going to want to stay. It's going to be nearly impossible to move.
Yeah, it'll be the stickiest feature of internet history.
Right.
And the problem is it hasn't been around long enough, so people don't see that impact of that trained data and the value of it. They don't see it until they not only have it, but they keep it for a while. But the problem with this one is, and I think it was maybe Elon Musk said it right. Like by the time that you figure that out, and he did it in a different way with regulation or something. But by the time you figure out that, oh crap, I need it, it's going to be too late.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what is the solution to that then? Is it to basically create your own decentralized version of this, kind of like what you're doing?
That's
and is that
opinion.
Yeah, I think so too.
Flexible. You'll be able to still use all the language models that come in. You can still tie it to wherever you want to. You could still maybe use those other platforms alongside if you can't fully maybe pull it out because you have 10,000 employees sitting on a CRM. But at least maybe figure out ways to start training your own, maybe sitting over here in the bunker, like a bottle of wine, and just keep start somewhere. And not everybody you don't have to go and change everything in your organization. Just get it somewhere started and just start figuring out where you can slowly integrate and at least have some of that value. I mean, it's probably not practical to say that every company this year is going to jump off and do their own replatforming and going on some kind of blockchain internal enterprise generative AI solution, but it's not cost prohibitive. The value's near instant. And I think as people just baby step it in, they'll realize not only the value of having it internally, but that it actually overall is going to cost much more, and the ROI will be much higher.
I think,
Boom.
yeah,
That's right. There's a great ending point. That was brilliant. Drop the
Yeah.
mic.
Yeah. The only thing
we could go on and talk for hours, I think, if we want.
Yeah, the only thing I wanted to kind of ask, if it's one more, we could edit it out, Travis. If not, is, Danny, what have you thought about as you've been because you just brought up a bunch of points. I know we were talking a little bit about it as far as who is the person in a company, call it 50 million to $1 billion in revenue, which is a big range, but call it lower middle market, where they're nimble enough, but they're big enough where they need this, but they could actually take action against it because they're not going to get bogged down. Who is the person that needs to be in this? Is it a cross-functional team? It feels like it should be, probably from the
Yeah, but I just feel like that's the practical one, but I think that's the logical one, but I don't think it's practical. I think you got to start at a, find a couple processes, whether that's marketing or data and I don't know, and then maybe it's even the team types. There are people that are more willing to push it forward.
I agree with you. When you talk about digital, usually when you start off, you create like a center of excellence or even a person of expertise and excellence to rally everyone, because everyone's just busy right now. And now that the economy is coming back after COVID, everyone's going to be so busy. And who's going to be the one in charge of setting this up?
Yeah, it's like an advocate, that internal advocate, and they don't need to be, they don't need to be an AI developer to be that person.
No, I want the chief prompt engineer.
Yeah.
Chief prompt.
Yeah. Anyway, well, fascinating conversation, Danny. Thanks for joining us, and we'll look forward to, in 6 months, that'll feel like maybe 6 years. So maybe we do it again and see where things are in 6 months.
I'll have my avatar twin here talking to you instead.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. We will too. We'll just have everybody. I'll be a bot interviewing. We'll be sleeping or, working on stuff. Awesome.
Okay,
Thanks for tuning in, everybody.
Appreciate it.
Boom. Good deal.